Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 35th episode of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Turford, the level 99 human Archmage, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 Elf Ranger, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing this lovely, lovely evening, good sir?
I'm doing good. All right, we're out of the coffee bit. I understand that, but we have a beer bit going on now.
Oh,
now we've
evolved.
All right, I got this. Yes. What really sucks in Pennsylvania, the state laws there are really bad with like alcohol and like selling alcohol next to like grocery stores or whatever. Mm-hmm. So like stores can't really sell alcohol as much. You have to create a separate store. In California, you can sell wherever you want. So Trader Joe's has $5 IPAs, 6-pack. Nice. Isn't that insane, Ryan?
That's
pretty good.
Pretty cheap considering when you look at Canadian beer, it's like 3 times as expensive. Also, right. what are you drinking there? Because we can't actually see the label because it blurs it out.
Well, that's probably good. It's a Boatswain Hazy IPA. And a Boatswain, I think it's like Trader Joe's like generic brand.
Oh,
and
okay.
They have regular IPA, double IPA, and hazy IPA. And all of them are $5 here.
Dang, son. That's the dream.
Good.
That's the dream.
Yep.
Well, anyways, this is not the beer cast. This is the RPG Cave where we talk about RPGs all the time. So let's clear the garage of those pesky mobs. So folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, subscribe to us on your podcast feed of choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. We're on all the places you find podcasts. So check us out there. Of course, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you could also do us a solid and, leave us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Maybe leave an Apple Podcast review. If you leave an Apple Podcast review, we will actually read it on the show. So there's that incentive as well. Also, if you want to see our beautiful faces every single week, head over to YouTube, youtube.com/Yumi Capri. We put up a video version of the show every single Saturday morning over there. And of course, like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell like I'm doing on the video, even though if you're listening on audio, you're like, what the heck is Ryan doing with his finger? But that's me ringing the bell on YouTube. And then last but not least, if you want early access to this and all of our shows, head over to Patreon, patreon.com/Yumi Capri. You get that. You get some other perks and other content over there on Yumi Capri, some exclusive content. Exclusive. But now...
Exclusive.
Let's read from the sacred text, Garret, because we got to get into this show because I think we've got a pretty fun one today. Folks, yes. Of course, know there's a big game coming out at the end of this week because this is coming out on Saturday and on Friday. Yeah. Elden Ring releases, Garret. We're not talking about Elden Ring today. Well, maybe we will a little bit, but we're talking about FromSoftware. That's our topic for the day. We're going to basically, rather than doing like a deep dive on the Souls games as a whole or talking about a specific series from FromSoft, we kind of want to just celebrate the history of FromSoftware, especially, I don't know if you knew this, Garret, but this year is actually the 35th anniversary of FromSoftware, which is just
35th.
Yeah, they're 35 years old this year. So
pretty old.
We're going to be celebrating a big anniversary for FromSoft. So we're going to talk about a lot of the games, but we're doing like a lot of surface level stuff because admittedly, and I think for full transparency, we have to kind of state this at the very beginning. Neither Garret or I are, super Souls players. We're not super into the Souls games. The main reason why this show actually came about was actually thanks to our friends over on the Discord, the Yumi Capri Discord. The link is in the show notes, by the way, if you want to join the Yumi Capri Discord. And we were asking for ideas for the show, like topics that that people would love to see. FromSoftware and Dark Souls came up a lot, an awful lot.
Like a lot. I was so surprised how many people kept coming back with FromSoftware. I'm like, what are you guys doing? But yeah, it's a very passionate fan base over there, which it's awesome, man.
Absolutely.
Really cool.
So that's why, this show is more for the fans, I think, this time around.
It's really more for the fans, yes.
But I think we're still going to have a fun show nonetheless. But I just wanted to specify that before we get into anything. So if I say something dumb about Dark Souls, for example, you know why. So
you know why, yes.
So let's start, as we always do with Garret, with some fun facts. So I've got a few fun facts today, but then I kind of want to roll a lot of this stuff into the conversations we're going to talk about with some of these series. So first up, in their time developing games, FromSoftware has developed 62 games, not including Elden Ring. Elden Ring will be the 63rd game from FromSoftware. FromSoftware was founded in Tokyo on November 1st, 1986. But in 1986, the company was not making games. They were making Japanese productivity software, like the equivalent of like Microsoft Word for Japan or stuff like Excel.
Interesting.
Like a bunch of like business office products.
Like computer products of some kind.
Like computer software
products.
specifically. Cool. That was their deal. That was what they were formed to do. And it really wasn't until the early 90s that the company idea shifted to games in the first place, because the people in the FromSoftware office were actually playing a game called Wizardry, which was a game that originally originated on the Apple II, but eventually got ported to Japan in the form of an NES cart, as well as a Super Famicom release as well. And that's how Japanese players got a hold of this. And people in the office at FromSoftware were really into this thing. So they're like, hey, what if we made a game? That was kind of how the idea of them actually getting into game design actually came about. So even though the company was actually founded in 1986, their very first game didn't come out until December 16th, 1994 on the PlayStation 1. That game is called Kingsfield. Kingsfield, for the folks that don't know, is kind of like the game that inspired Dark Souls in a lot of ways, because it was a first-person dungeon crawling game that had a lot of similar elements to Dark Souls. For example, you had like currency and experience and that you could spend to kind of level your character up. But then if you died while you're out and about in the dungeon, you would lose that, and you'd basically have to go back and kind of go through the dungeon again, of course, and kind of reclaim all the stuff that you lost in a lot of ways. It was a really interesting game, really tough game. It's actually a game I talked a lot about on the Roundabout. We did a Xbox 360 series over in the Xbox Drive, and I did a Dark Souls episode over there where I talk about Kingsfield a lot. So if you want to hear me go into actually a lot of detail about Kingsfield, go listen to that episode. I think it's actually a good representation of it. But interestingly enough, though, Kingsfield was actually a launch window title for the PlayStation 1, because in Japan, the console came out the week before Kingsfield came out, and then they came out the week after, essentially. So
they really started when Sony really started their their own system. I guess, were they talking with Sony a lot?
Yeah, because they were looking for people to work with, and Sony was looking for developers, and it just came together. But
and they never made games for Nintendo, right? Oh wow. I mean, that's kind of cool to see a big third-party developer not going in Japan, not starting with Nintendo, but starting with Sony.
They actually eventually got to Nintendo in 2002, because they released a GameCube game, but that was their very first Nintendo release. But before that, they had 12 games under their belt at that time, which is just crazy to think about. So after Kingsfield came out, it was actually a pretty big success in Japan, but they never actually localized it in the States or released it outside of Japan for whatever reason. I think it comes down to the difficulty thing, because at the time, I think Japan didn't want to release ultra difficult games outside of Japan. Essentially, that was kind of the stigma that happened at the time. That was the whole reason why we didn't get Super Mario Brothers 2 here in North America. We got the other Super Mario Brothers 2 instead, essentially. So they actually, FromSoftware, with the success of Kingsfield, actually put out 2 additional Kingsfield games after that. But after doing 3 Kingsfield games, they're like, hey, this is cool and all, but we want to try a whole bunch of different stuff and get kind of wacky. So they basically decided to ramp up the company a little bit, basically split the company into 2 teams, and they essentially released almost 2 games, sometimes even 3 games in every single year going forward from that point.
Oh my goodness.
In a whole bunch of different genres, including
what a warhorse,
mech games, turn-based RPGs, stealth games, action RPGs, survival horror games, kid action adventure titles, and more mech games. It's just, if you look at believe it or not, if you go on the FromSoftware website, because they actually have a history section on there, it's crazy just looking at how much stuff they had their hands in, or how many games they developed. They even were publishing games at the time too. I know that folks might be familiar with the Tenchu series, which is a stealth ninja game that was on the PlayStation 1 that was actually really popular at the time. That game was published by FromSoftware, but it wasn't developed by them. And they actually developed all the PSP versions of Tenchu when they started to put that series on the PSP, which is really interesting.
So what was their idea behind this? Like, it sounds like they were just training up to like, I don't know, like, was that the way to go about it, to separate your teams and make all these games? Like, I guess it was cheaper to develop games at the time too.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of factors that go into it. You're definitely right about it being cheaper to make games at the time. Not only that, but you just didn't need as many staff as you need, nowadays.
Okay, yeah.
Plus, with a smaller company like this was before they were actually acquired at this point. So I think Kadokawa now actually owns them. Kadokawa is actually a really big media company in Japan. They actually produce a lot of anime, for example. That's kind of how I know Kadokawa from. But they own FromSoftware. They purchased them much later. So at the time, anyways, they needed to keep the company afloat. And they thought the best way to do that is release like kind of as many games as possible. But it almost didn't matter because all the games, for the most part, actually had like a really good reputation to them, especially the Armored Core series, which actually the very first one actually came out on July 10th, 1997. It was a mech game on the PlayStation 1, and it spawned this giant series of games from there as well.
Yes.
So, and not only that, but they did eventually return to Kingsfield in 2001 on the PlayStation 2 with a fourth game in the series as well. They also did a bunch of other games as well that were like with kind of the Kingsfield team that were like spiritual successors to Kingsfield. So it almost felt like, again, just looking at the company's history and examining it more closely, it almost felt like they're throwing like darts at the board, like trying to figure out
pretty much,
what would stick and
see what sticks. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like the example, I always just laugh at the fact that they were actually the developers, The Adventures of Cookie and Cream, which was this kids game starring this these two adorable rabbits on the PlayStation 2.
Oh my goodness.
Probably never thought that FromSoftware would do an E for Everyone game about, like rabbits.
But they did it.
That was certainly a thing. They also, Garrett, you might be surprised about this as well. They actually worked on some Monster Hunter games as well. They actually worked on some Monster Hunter spin-off games called the Monster Hunter Diary series, which was almost like these
I've heard of them.
Simulation games. Well, I mean, there's no wonder you wouldn't have heard of them because they're only in Japan. It's my favorite thing to say on this show. Only in Japan, of course. In fact, that's why even though FromSoftware's done a lot of games, we just haven't heard a lot of them about them because most of them didn't come out here. A lot of their games were Japan only. And for the most part, we got a lot of the mech games, like a lot of the Armored Core games. Mm-hmm. We got, some stuff like Enchanted Arms, which was on the Xbox 360, which was like a turn-based role-playing game from them. As well as like Ninja Blade, which was this, Ninja Gaiden, like almost like rip-off game. Like it was like a Ninja Gaiden clone essentially when Ninja Gaiden was really popular. So they did a lot of stuff like that too, that came out here. But of course, the company's history totally changed with the release of Demon's Souls on PlayStation 3 on February 5th, 2009. Essentially from this point, when you look at their history, all of their game production totally like slowed to a halt at that point after Demon's Souls came out, because essentially they had kind of birthed a new genre, the soulsborne genre, which again, kind of you could argue already existed back when Kingsfield came out, because Kingsfield again is kind of like a Soulsborne game. It just doesn't follow the exact same formula as modern Soulsborne game does, but it's definitely kind of in that genre already. But then after that, for the most part, they released a couple other Armored Core games, as well as a Mobile Suit Gundam game that was Japan only, and Garrett's favorite game of all time, Steel Battalion Heavy Armor. That was the Kinect exclusive Steel Battalion game, which was considered one of the worst games on the Xbox 360. So
FromSoftware made a Kinect exclusive.
Yep. Kinect exclusive Steel Battalion.
That's actually kind of crazy to say.
Yeah.
That's good for you, FromSoftware.
Yeah. So they made all kinds of crazy stuff.
Dark Souls.
But I'll elaborate on that more when we kind of get into questions, because we actually got questions about some of their odder and more obscure games. But that's all I have kind of for fun facts before we go into the conversation. So Garrett, what do you think about the early days of FromSoftware and kind of their history? Because I think it's almost like a tale of two companies in a lot of ways, where it's like pre-Demon's Souls and then everything after Demon's Souls, essentially.
Yeah, what a unique company, man. All the different types of games that they made earlier beforehand The way they started, of course, it's actually not unique too much. We've seen other companies do other things before they turn into game companies. But yeah, it's super neat to see. And I know Dark Souls and the Soulsborne genre, very well known, very passionate group. Of course, they're going to chase after that. I'm glad that they are. I'm glad that they're continuing to do this. I think that's a good evolution for them. Who is the creative or the head person? I forgot his name. It's like
Miyazaki-san.
Miyazaki-san. I remember it shared it with Hidetaki. Yeah. So that's one of the few names in the industry that you know. It's like it's like a Hideo Kojima. It's like you know who that guy is. Did he start the Demon Souls?
Yeah, he was the director on Demon Souls. Before that, he actually worked on Armored Core because his first game that he worked on was 2005's Armored Core Last Revan. He was basically like a planner on that. And then after that, he worked on Armored Core 4, and then it was Demon Souls, and he's been leading all the Soulsborne games after that point.
Yeah. Really cool sets of games after that. And I'm glad, they went through Demon Souls and then Dark Souls, and we kind of know the story behind that, but I'm glad that they did stuff like Bloodborne, Sekiro, a little bit of differentiation off of the Dark Souls, slow and beat, drum over there. And I'm actually pretty excited for Elden Ring. I haven't played, as obviously, I have not played these games at all. I actually put a tweet out asking everyone, hey, what should I start with? And a couple of people said even try the Demon Souls remake on PS5.
Yeah.
Like that's probably a good start. I've heard Bloodborne as well is a great start, and maybe even Elden Ring if like seeing reviews and seeing how accessible it is. I think Elden Ring could be a good bridge because it looks very open world, and then but has that Dark Souls combat to it. So yeah, I'm FromSoftware. I'm looking at you guys.
Yeah,
I'm looking at you.
So for me, obviously, my very first FromSoftware game, wasn't any of the Soulsborne games or anything like that.
Yeah,
it would actually go all the way back to the original Xbox in a game that I've talked about a lot on the Xbox Drive. Otogi Myth of Demons was actually my very first FromSoftware game. It was basically this like Japanese mythological like Devil May Cry game kind of mixed with a whole bunch of other elements. What was interesting about it was it had a lot of like environmental destruction. So when you would attack enemies, you'd have heavy moves that would like knock enemies through walls and stuff like that, or like blow up buildings and stuff like that. It was really cool. It was like a really cool and unique idea for a game. And it actually was a really solid game on Xbox, original Xbox. It even got a sequel as well, Otogi 2 Immortal Warriors, which is fantastic. And it's also climbed up in prices now, one of the most expensive original Xbox games at like $200. And I see that jokingly because literally 2 years ago, I bought that game because I had sold my collection a long time ago for the original Xbox. I bought that game for $20 new off Amazon US because they were selling them brand new from, Amazon directly like 2 years ago. And now that game's like gone up like 10 times in price essentially, which is just
that's crazy,
hilarious to think about. So that was kind of my introduction to FromSoftware. And you see some elements in Otogi that, are pulled from Dark Souls, like kind of the way you gain experience, for example, but more of as well as the difficulty. But the difficulty in Otogi was mostly due to a time limit you had on certain areas, which just was kind of grueling. Like sometimes you just have barely enough time to get through the entire area.
I don't like time limits.
Yeah, I don't really love it either.
Oh man, that's rough. Is it like you had to beat all the enemies in like a certain area, or what was it?
Some of them were like that. Some of them were you'd have really large sprawling areas, and you basically had to get to the end of the area in that time frame.
Okay,
and it was just the traversal that took a while, because you also had to fight enemies along the way, essentially. But it didn't really have like boss arenas that you'd fight in per se, because it had these like open world areas, kind of similar to something like Rise of the Tomb Raider, but just not having all of those areas connected together in like an open world, if that makes sense. Because it was a linear game versus like you had individual levels as opposed to it being like one, big open world kind of thing. So either way, that's a game I really enjoyed. And then after that, my next kind of brush up with FromSoftware was Chrome Hounds, which it was an Xbox 360 launch title, which was this really bad mech game. But I tried to convince myself it was awesome and kept playing it because I was like, man, I really need something to play on my 360. And oh boy,
that was one of them.
That was a game.
You could have just played Call of Duty 2. You could have played Quake 4.
But at that point, I'd already beaten those games, Garrett. I already had the 1,000 gamer score in Call of Duty.
You play online. Actually, Call of Duty 2 online was...
It was so
good. That was a rough one. It was good. It was just rough. Online.
I had so much fun playing that on 360 Call of Duty 2s online. I think it was awesome. Mm-hmm. But Chrome Hounds, really rough game. And then after that,
so I guess they really like to do launch software into these consoles.
Either that or launch Windows stuff. Yeah, they usually
launch Windows stuff.
Especially again, you have to consider the number of games they were putting out at this time because essentially, when the Demon Souls barrier hit, they've only released 14 games since Demon Souls. And remember the total I gave you at the beginning, Garrett? 62 games, and only 14 of those were after Demon Souls. So it's just crazy. Yeah. So it was like they had releasing so many games every year. They just naturally happened to hit like every console launch period essentially in that time frame, which was interesting. But yeah, after that, then I played Demon Souls on PlayStation 3. It was a game that was not on my radar before it came out, but I remember like reviews came out and they were glowing for the game. I remember a lot of 10 out of 10s for the game. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try this game out. And boy, this game is not for me.
It kicked your butt.
It's not, but it's not. But here's the thing. My thing, and I've always said this about the Souls games, or especially Demon Souls in particular, it's not the difficulty that gets to me because I like hard games. It's the slowness of the gameplay and the controls that kills me. Right? With especially with the dodges and parries and the shield blocks and stuff like that. I'm just like, come on, man. Like I understand that it's more realistic that way. And I think it definitely appeals to like a bigger subset of people that I'm kind of letting on. Just for me personally, it doesn't do anything for me. Whereas I love stuff like Neo from Team Ninja, which that game is in the Soulsborne formula is really hard. But at the same time, it's at a much faster pace. It's much more arcadey. I mean, you don't even have a block button in that game. So you
just jump around. Really, I remember that.
It's a lot about. There's a lot of parrying in that game too.
Yeah, parrying in it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but I love Neo, so that's why that's more of the type of experience I'm looking for like a Soulsborne game, or even something like Code Vein. I really love that one from Bandai Namco as well.
You like Code Vein? Okay. Yeah, I kind of liked it too. I played it for quite a bit.
Yeah, and for the same reasons I liked it, like Neo, even though it was a little bit slower than something like Neo, I still really liked that game as well. So it's not so much that I don't like Soulsborne games. And I'll talk about it a little bit later because we got a question about this too, like what game I actually played to completion of these. But for the most part, it's just the combat design of Dark Souls is what kills it for me, not the difficulty, if that makes sense. So Demon Souls was like that when I first played it for the first time and went from there. Whereas Garrett, what about you? What was your very first experience with a FromSoftware game?
My first experience was actually Bloodborne. I tried it. I tried it probably back in it was close when it was launching. It was 2016 or 2015, something like that. Mm-hmm. I tried to stream it and like I really tried to go through the first area and I just died again after again. And like after 2 or 3 hours in one sitting, I'm the type of gamer, I like progression. I like, being like, even though I lost something, I at least progressed. That's why I like roguelites too. Cause it's like, okay, I died, but at least I got something. I got some progression going on. Mm-hmm. This one is just like, no, you're going to go back to the beginning. You're going to go back to square one. And I'm like, I'm not having fun with this because of that. I understand that. I heard Bloodborne is pretty accessible after you like kind of get it, like after the first boss or whatever, the first area. I know a lot of people, that was their first entry going into it. But yeah, Bloodborne was my first. I have actually not tried others from the. I actually did play a little bit of Dark Souls 1. Okay. Remastered on Steam. I played it for like 2 or 3 hours and I got the hang of it. I was just like, I was trying it. And then I was, going to other games because I was like, this is not my focus right now. But it's definitely on my short list. Dark Souls 1 Remastered is on my Steam, on my laptop. So I'll definitely play it later. And then Demon Souls Remastered, even though this is not, this was kind of redeveloped, I guess, or remastered by Bluepoint. I'm intending to grab that later.
Okay.
Especially when it hits a sale again. I think it should be pretty cheap this year. It's like,
I was gonna say it went on sale like
$20
a month ago too. So and it was like $20 or $30 off, and then I imagine it's just gonna go down from there. And not only that, but we've talked about it on the PlayStation Drive. But I suspect when they roll out Project Spartacus, which is kind of like the rumored, PlayStation competitor to Game Pass, I actually think Demon Souls Remake will actually be one of the games that they include on that service down the road
for sure.
So there's also that as well. That route to go with it. Cool. That's the game that I haven't checked out either, even though I have a PS5. I had picked up the other launch titles like Sackboy's A Big Adventure or Miles Morales instead.
Cool.
So I never really got to it. But yeah, that's really interesting. Bloodborne in particular, the issue I had with that in particular, playing it on day one, I don't know if you remember this, Garrett, but the long load times in Bloodborne
long load times.
Insufferable. In fact, they had to patch it like a week or two after it came out. To kind of reduce the load times, because if you played the game when it first came out, every time you died, it was a minute and a half load time, like to get back into the game. No. So like you almost felt like you weren't progressing at all in the game, because like every time you died, it would take you so long to get back to the area, so long to get back into the game. Then you had to run back to like the area you were in, and by the time you did that, you're like, what am I even doing with this game?
I'm gonna die again like right now, and then just restart from there.
But the thing is with these games, I mean, yes, they're difficult, but the idea is that you as the player are going to grow from dying. So even though you're not walking away with like any in-game experience, you as the player are gaining experience from each combat encounter. At least that's how the game is designed, where, it's expecting you to kind of learn from each encounter and kind of approach the enemies differently the next time you go back there. Because essentially they keep all the enemy patterns and whatnot all stagnant. Like they don't change any of it up. They don't randomize it or anything like that. So that's why actually, if you watch like the Dark Souls speedrunning community, one of the most popular categories is like blindfolded Dark Souls runs or Bloodborne runs, where you play the entire game blindfolded, because they know the game so well, because it's not randomized, that you can play it blindfolded because of the fact that everything's always in the same place. You know
exactly what moves and like how long to move and attack. That's crazy.
Yeah, the only thing that's kind of like mixed up is some of the boss attacks, like the order that certain bosses do attacks in and whatnot. But for the most part, like all of the enemies spawn in the exact same areas, regardless of how many times you go through it. So that's kind of Dark Souls' way of trying to teach the player and to give you kind of something, even when you die, even if you do lose all your experience, you are getting kind of the knowledge and your own personal experience and growth as to, where you're going from there. Like that's kind of.
Let me tell you, I'm kind of jealous of the Dark Souls community and the Soulsborne community in general, because they are in love with these games. They're very nice. And I'm not saying that they're obsessive, but when they talk about Dark Souls, when they talk about Bloodborne, it's like, oh, it's a masterpiece. Like, going into it, it's a masterpiece, the boss design, the pacing, the progression. And I'm like, I wish I had, maybe I have a game or two in my head that's kind of like that, but I don't have a series that's like that at all. And so, yeah, I'm actually really curious of like trying Dark Souls 1 or Demon Souls to see what it is like, because or even Bloodborne. I heard like late game Bloodborne and like the DLC is like just fantastic. And so,
yeah, especially the lore in particular. I know that's one thing that people love with those games, especially because it doesn't like. It tells you a story, but not like in a standard way. Like there's a lot of, hidden stuff that you have to find throughout the game, and the way you interact with people kind of changes how the story plays out, as well as you learning a lore about kind of the world itself and a lot of that stuff. So I know that's one of the more popular things and what keeps people from coming back to the games. And the one piece of advice I'll give to anyone with Soulsborne games in particular who's struggling with them is you have to stick with them. That's the biggest thing. That's how you learn and do all the stuff that I referenced, is that you learn by playing, and you have to play it a lot. You have to commit time to it. Otherwise, you're not going to really get anywhere with them. Like, that's kind of the problem you run into with these games. So obviously with people like us, especially Garrett, especially lately, it's like we haven't had a lot of time to really commit to games. So it's very hard to always find a window to do that. Whereas it's not as forgiving to like putting it down for 2 weeks and then coming back to it as, other RPGs are. And even then, like a lot of other RPGs too, I'm just going to pretty much start them over anyways if I put them down for that long.
Pretty much, yeah.
But I think there are some examples of some RPGs, for example, you could go back to, especially some more linear ones or just more modern RPGs in particular. But,
or even like turn-based in general. Like you could probably get into those and like
Persona, for example, is a game that I think you could play for like a week or two, get about halfway through it and maybe put it down and come back to it. Especially because there's a lot of tools in the game that recount the story, combined with the fact that, it's kind of a daily system. And there's a lot of stuff that go along with that. And you can maybe play that game in chunks, whereas Dark Souls, you can't do that with that game. Like you can't unless, again, you've played it so many times, you kind of, know where everything is kind of thing. So there you go.
Cool.
So that's how we feel about Dark Souls games in particular. Sekiro, though, I think was actually a really interesting one because for a long time we had thought that this might actually be like a Tenchu game, because as I had talked about earlier, Tenchu was that stealth action series that had ninjas in it, that they had published and then they'd worked on PSP versions for, but we didn't. And not only that, but we knew that they had the IP available to them through Activision for them to do a Tenchu game, but they didn't actually end up doing Tenchu. They did this Sekiro game, which in a lot of ways actually has a lot of roots with a game like Tenchu, where a lot of the stealth elements from that game feel like they're ripped, straight out of Tenchu. So I definitely think it's, in a way, it's a Tenchu spiritual successor, while also being like a really good arcadey Souls-like experience. And that was the last game we really got from FromSoftware before Elden Ring comes out this week. So, it's been 3 years since their last game, which is interesting to see. But Sekiro was a game I liked a lot. But again, I have more to say about that, but we'll talk about it in a bit because we have a question about it. So, Garrett, where's your hype level for Elden Ring? I know you've talked about it at least a little bit on this show, but where's the hype level at? Where's the hype check now that we're 6 days away from Elden Ring?
I'm not I'm not into these series or whatever. I've seen gameplay of Elden Ring and it's Dark Souls. It's like, oh, okay. I know the combat. I've seen this before. What I'm intrigued about is the open world. I'm actually surprised how fast they turned this Elden Ring development around and they kept with their word. Did they delay it ever? I keep forgetting.
They just never announced a release date for it. So
see, they're smart because they really haven't delayed that much, and they're sticking to their word. Like it's coming out. I was very surprised by that because I remember hearing it for the first time. It's like, oh, that's gonna. It felt like a Skyrim in my head. It was like or a new Elder Scrolls. It was like, oh, that's coming in 2025 or something like that.
Well, I mean, it's got George R. R. Martin working on it, so of course it's going to take
that's
forever,
why.
Right? So,
right. But they booked it and they wrapped it up, and I've seen gameplay of it and it looks really good. It's like, I would say like more of an open world Bethesda Elder Scrolls game melded with a Dark Souls kind of atmosphere, ambiance to it, I guess you can say. I'm really digging it. I'm not gonna be day one. Just letting you guys know, I'm not gonna be day one on Elden Ring, but I will be reading reviews. I will be watching gameplay. I will be looking at sales because I think I will eventually try it out, one way or the other. But yeah, that's my kind of like hype level with it. I'm definitely interested in it.
Okay. That's cool. That's good to know. Whereas for me, like, again, I'm just going to wait for reviews because I'm curious because even though the combat itself is kind of more of the slower Dark Souls-y combat, I'm curious of how the pace of the open world is going to change that and maybe, make it more up my alley. So I'm kind of waiting for reviews. Maybe I'll watch a live stream or two of it to kind of get my fill of it and maybe see if it's for me. And then at that point, if it seems like it's going to be up my alley, then I'll definitely try it out. Again, I've actually bought every Dark Souls game that's come out, hoping that the next one will be for me. And I'm always giving it a chance more than anything, because I love kind of the world of Dark Souls and kind of the idea behind it. And that's why it just pains me so much that the gameplay has just never clicked for me. So I'm hoping Elden Ring might be the one, maybe. But I'm definitely going to do a lot more of my research before it comes out. But I'm also really happy to just see all the hype people have for this game and just how excited people are for it coming out. I think it's going to be one of the biggest games to come out this year. And I'm just excited for other people to be excited about this, because it's for some people, I think with this game in particular is like one of the most exciting things for them in a very long time. So I'm just happy that a lot of people have a game like this that they're excited about. So that's all I really got to say about that. So Garret, what do you think is going to be next with FromSoftware? Where do you think they go after Elden Ring? Do you think they continue down? Because they've already kind of said that they're done doing Dark Souls as a series in particular, at least for a while. So I don't think that's going to be next. But what do you think they do after Elden Ring? Or what kind of game would you like to see from them next?
Yeah. Definitely it's going to be still they're going to be with what they identify with. The soulsborne formula or the combat. With the reception of Elden Ring, I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be at least good. I think they can. I mean, I don't think the next game is going to be an Elden Ring 2. I'm not saying that. I could see a sequel to Sekiro 2 or Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I can see. Well, I'm not sure about Bloodborne. Right. Everyone keeps saying, oh, the sequel to Bloodborne's coming. Oh my gosh, it's going to be... Every time I hear about Bloodborne, I'm getting so tired of it at this point, especially with like a Bloodborne like remastered or whatever on PS5. It's like, it's never going to happen. They haven't done it yet. But yeah, I could totally see a sequel to Sekiro, Elden Ring 2, maybe. I'm trying to think of like what of a different franchise or whatever. I'm not too sure. I want to see them try to stem out a little bit away from the gothic stuff, because like it's really cool, and it has each of them have their own identity. I think Bloodborne has a great gothic feel to it. I think Dark Souls more medieval, really cool. But I feel like every time I see a FromSoftware game or a Soulsborne game, it's like I know what it is. It's like that's a Soulsborne game. That's FromSoftware. I want to see a game where I'm like, oh, that's a Western RPG, And they're like, no, that's made by FromSoftware. It's like, wait, what? Like, I want that type of style, Like, give me something vibrant, something lively, something colorful, but have the same combat or whatever. That's great. But like every time I see gameplay of Dark Souls or whatever, I'm like, I mean, it's cool. It's really cool. It's really interesting. And I was like, at the same time, it's like, it's just the same kind of thing over and over again. It's just skulls and reapers and big knights, and I don't know. I'm getting kind of tired of it.
It's like you're in the same purgatory as the characters in Dark Souls are in, Garret.
No joke. Like every time. I think Bloodborne was a really cool feel, but again, it felt like Dark Souls, the Japan feudal version. Like it has that, that I don't know what the feeling is. It's like grotesqueness. I don't know exactly what I'm feeling with it. But yeah, it's just more dark than anything.
Yeah.
I want to see something bright, something colorful.
That's their whole theme. They're just they're dark with all of their games. And to be fair, even some of their other series, like Armored Core, for example, was like just a darker mech series in particular and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like it's been a long time since the Adventures of Cookie and Cream, or even stuff like Metal Wolf Chaos with its like really goofy tone. It's been a long time since they've done something like that, or even the Monster Hunter Diary games, which again were like cute, chibi, like Monster Hunter looking games that were not, the standard Monster Hunter affair. So definitely not looking like anything FromSoftware currently makes. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I would love to see them branch out a bit. Maybe get back to doing something that's not a Soulsborne game. I mean, can I ask that of them? Maybe go back to Armored Core. I think that would be like really cool. Or even just see them do like another mech game of some kind. Because number one, we don't get enough mech games nowadays. And number two, they were really good at them. Other than Chrome Hounds, I think that was like the only one that really faltered for me. But otherwise, all the Armored Core games were awesome. So like, I would love to see them maybe explore kind of that space again. Like even if they want to make like a really difficult mech game or a really difficult game in like another genre, maybe they even go back to like a turn-based RPG, like something like Thousand Arms or something like that. That'd be cool. That may be like really interesting to see like them go back and do some other stuff. I know I'm just kidding myself though, because unlike you, Garrett, I'm not going to just stamp on the heart of poor Mr. Badbit and saying that they'll never do a Bloodborne 2 or a Bloodborne remaster. There will be a Bloodborne remaster or a Bloodborne 2, probably not done by FromSoftware though. I actually don't think that they're going to do it. I think that'll actually be Bluepoint like that does that.
I agree with you. Yes. If it's anyone, it's Bluepoint.
Yeah.
Is Bloodborne a Sony IP? It is a Sony IP,
I'm
right?
pretty sure it is. So.
Yeah. There's been some weird, like, kind of IP related ownership or whatever, but Demon's Souls is Sony. Mm-hmm. And that's why Bluepoint was able to do that. Bloodborne, it seems like more, I think Sony owns it, but it seems like more of an agreement than anything.
Yeah.
Or they just really got to wait until it was like, okay, we got our studio and it's Bluepoint. So here you go, Bluepoint. I'm
just still shocked that they haven't done like a 60 frames per second patch on PS5 for that game yet. Like it's still ridiculous.
Well, I think I've seen some videos behind it. Apparently, if you have the physical version, Digital Foundry did this. If you had the physical version pre-patched on like PS4 Pro or whatever, you're able to get 60 frames.
Yes,
somewhat.
Something like that happened with like Assassin's Creed Unity was the same way.
Yeah,
where the unpatched version of the game had an uncapped frame rate. So if you played it on a modern console like a PS5, it would run at 60 frames per second or higher even.
Yeah.
So
I don't know why they haven't done it either. Maybe they're just waiting until they do the PC port and be like, okay, here's a double whammy. Here's the PC port. Here's the 60 frames update for everyone. Let's get hyped for Bloodborne 2. Yeah. Like, I think that's a good marketing jab. Is like, let's do these things and then let's push into Bloodborne 2. And if Bluepoint's doing this, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it got announced pretty soon, maybe this year. But if Bloodborne's happening, it's got to be at least this year or next year.
Yeah, I just don't. And with the way the heads at FromSoftware talk about where the direction of where they want to go, I just don't think that they're interested in doing a sequel to Bloodborne or just doing more Bloodborne. I don't think. Yeah, which is why I think it's going to probably get done, and it'll be probably a Bluepoint thing. Which is why I think. Yeah, we're more likely to be either A, see a sequel to something like Sekiro, or B, if they really want to do a sequel to Elden Ring, they'll do one. Like if it's successful enough or they want to, explore the world again. But I'm not getting the vibes from the way they talk about Elden Ring that they are going to want to go back to it, at least right away. Yeah. So that's why I would I think the opportunity is there for them to either make a new IP or even do something different, like something radically different. Like I would love to, again, see them explore other genres, just like, the older days of FromSoftware, or, just do something completely different from the thing you described.
VR
like
exclusive studio.
Yeah.
From now on.
There
true. You go. PlayStation VR 2 launch title. I could, you know what? I'm going to say it. I think they're going to make a launch title for PSVR 2.
That'll go alongside that Horizon game that's coming out on launch day as well.
Yeah. Side by side.
But that's this year.
Bloodborne.
That's this year. Assuming
PSVR 2 is this year.
Well, that's what Matt Swinsky keeps trying to convince me over on the PlayStation Drive.
No, that's no.
And in fact,
PSVR 2 is next year.
We even got questions about it this week, saying, so when PSVR 2 comes out later this year, that was how the question started off, Garrett.
Don't, please stop. It's not coming this year.
Exactly.
I don't know these people.
But yeah, so ultimately, I think we went through a lot of the FromSoftware stuff, but let's get into some of the questions, because we got some questions from the audience about FromSoftware. And Garrett, I don't know if you knew this. People were very excited that we wanted to talk about FromSoftware. Although there's one question in particular that I'm like, there's no way either of us are going to be able to answer this question. But let's start with Andrew Semichek on the Discord.
Yeah.
Who asked the question, what is one of the under the radar FromSoftware games that you loved pre-Dark Souls? So, Garrett, I know you started with Bloodborne, but you didn't go back and play any of the pre-Dark Souls stuff, right? At all?
The only thing I've had some like kind of experience with is the Armored Core. I forgot which Armored Core game I played, but I did play some of it in certain systems. I remember mechs.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm pretty sure it was Armored Core.
It was,
and I thought it was,
if it was one, it was probably
cool.
Armored Core 4, because that game came out on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360.
Yes.
And I remember like that game actually being really popular. So it was probably that one.
I think it was that for sure. And I think it was just a demo on 360.
It was a demo for it. So yeah, that was probably it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I played that and it was really fun. It was a really fun demo, Andrew. So there you go.
Your answer is Armored Core 4. For me, obviously I talked about it before and I did a whole episode on the Xbox Drive about this. Otogi Myth of Demons, one of my favorite games on the Xbox 360 or the original Xbox.
Wow.
And I really love that game. So that's definitely got to be my top pick. Metal Wolf Chaos is probably my second pick as far as, under the radar game, where it's, and I told Garrett this off air before, what the premise of this game is, where essentially you play as the president of the United States who drives around a mech. And there's basically this coup on the White House and it's led by the vice president in his own mech. And then you have this big showdown between the president and the vice president of the United States. And it's like such a goofy game. It's got some terrible voice acting, but man, it's a really fun game. They actually did like a Switch port of it as well. But that port's real bad. So,
okay. Don't play it.
Yeah. They didn't do a good job with the port, but the game itself, I can commit, is solid, but you'd have to go back and play it on the original Xbox because it wasn't exclusive and it's actually a very expensive game on the original Xbox. So maybe not that one.
Oh, great.
And then you brought up Armored Core already, so I would have said that. But then I'm going to throw a shout out to Ninja Blade, which again was kind of like a Ninja Gaiden clone, but it had a lot more emphasis on like quick time events. But that game was like really fun. And you played as a ninja, and there was a whole bunch of like this near futuristic Japan, and there was a bunch of robots and stuff that you were fighting, and mythological creatures and stuff. It was really cool. So Ninja Blade is my other one that I wanted to throw in there, but there's a lot I could go through because again, there's a lot of like under the radar series. Again, stuff like the Tenchu games on PSP, I think were really good, or even something like Enchanted Arms, which is an RPG that I just think not enough people actually played, or Lost Kingdoms 2 on the GameCube. One of their only Nintendo exclusive games was that one, and I thought it was actually pretty good as well. So lot to choose from with FromSoftware.
A lot of pre-Dark Souls FromSoftware games you like. Yeah, I say you're a pre-Dark Souls FromSoftware fan.
Yeah,
for sure.
They've just appealed more to me.
It sounds like it.
Which again,
nice.
It just shows that I like FromSoftware. It's just Dark Souls' combat in particular is the thing I don't like. So it's the sticking point that I kind of have. Well, next up, TPR on the Discord, and I laugh because the beginning of his question's in all caps. My favorite RPG developer! Bloodborne is tied for my favorite game of all time, and I can't wait for Elden Ring in a couple weeks, or from the time that we're listening to this, of course, it's out in 6 days. Is there a FromSoft title that either of you have actually gotten into? Because TPR actually kind of knows our background, knows that we're not really into FromSoftware games. Doesn't have to be a Soulsborne related game like Armored Core, for example. If there isn't, what could pull you in without making the games easier, if anything? So to give you some time to think about your answer on this one, Garrett, there is a game from FromSoftware post Dark Souls that I've actually finished and really enjoyed. And that game was Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. The thing I liked about the game was the stealth elements in particular, because it almost felt like I was playing like a Soulsborne version of something like, Metal Gear Solid or Splinter Cell, where I was sneaking around. That's cool. Taking guys out. And really like the only time that the stealth elements didn't matter was when you were facing bosses. But the action combat was fast enough, combined with the fact that you had a grappling hook in that game, that it was just really satisfying to play. So I really enjoyed that game. Not only that, but I love kind of, Japanese mythology stuff. And there was a lot of, Japanese mythology tied into that game. And it also reminded me a lot of like the tone that we saw in games like Otogi, which is what I liked about that. Even though Otogi leaned much more into that stuff, I really like Sekiro. I think that game is awesome. So that's definitely the FromSoft game, post Dark Souls that I've gotten into and gotten really into. And as far as, changes to the gameplay, I think it's just, I talked about it earlier, but I think it's just making the gameplay faster. And again, I think Sekiro had kind of the right balance for me, where even when you had to get into combat and your stealth stuff failed, I still felt like the combat was fast enough in that game that it was to my liking. But I would maybe even like to see go a little bit faster, maybe go in that Neo direction, or Final Fantasy Stranger in Paradise. God, I can't believe I'm actually saying that.
The chaos that you're gonna kill.
Chaos. We got to get chaos, Garret.
Chaos.
But even that is actually more exciting to me than Elden Ring is, not just because it's a Final Fantasy game, but also because the combat just seems much more up my alley, and that's kind of the direction I would love to see FromSoft go more into, where it's less about blocking and stamina management, and more about faster action, I think, is more of what I'm looking forward to. Whereas the difficulty, again, to your point, TBR, I don't think they need to decrease the difficulty, because that's never been a bother for me. It's never been about the difficulty. Mm-hmm. But Garret, now that you've had time to think, what's your answer to this question?
Well, at least the FromSoft title, I'm being honest with you, TBR, I never got into a FromSoftware game. Like the games that you're mentioning, Ryan, I was like, what are these? I really haven't heard much of them other than Armored Core, the Armored Core series or franchise. What I like doing though is actually watching streams of Dark Souls players. Not necessarily like speedrunners or whatever, but just people that are into Dark Souls and just go through the game. It's actually pretty entertaining, because it makes it look so easy, going through Bloodborne, so easy. And I actually watched maybe even 3 or 4 gameplay throughs of Sekiro. Just seeing streamers just getting really into it, getting into the bosses and figuring it out. I think it's really cool to watch versus playing. So
makes sense.
I would have to say Sekiro is I wouldn't say it's my favorite FromSoft title. It's my favorite FromSoft title to watch. If I go onto Twitch, I actually kind of look up Sekiro gameplay throughs and see what people actually do in that game.
Nice. And what you described before you go on, Garret, if you don't mind if I so rudely interrupt you, is what you described almost sounds to me like what I do with retro games. Cause I even though there's a lot of retro games I love playing, I love actually going to watch people who are really good at retro games actually stream them, and people just plowing through some of the hardest NES games and stuff like that. And basically what you're describing to me sounds exactly like me going back and watching a lot of retro games, because in a lot of ways games like Dark Souls have that retro game feel to them, where you're going to be dying a lot in those games, and that's kind of how you learn it. And once you kind of memorize things, or where everything is, you kind of breeze through it in the way that you just described. So it's probably it's satisfying to watch, because again, you as a player know just how difficult that is, and they're just pulling it off like it's it's nobody's business. Whereas if it's someone goes into that same stream who's never played those games before, never played that type of game before, they might be like, oh, that looks really easy. I don't see why people go on Twitter and complain about why this game is too hard, or anything like that.
Right.
But go on and continue with your point, Garret, because I know you had more to say.
Well, yeah. So, what could pull me into the games is kind of what I've kind of critiqued before, is that everything's so grim, depressing. But there should be I'm not saying go completely oh, happy-go-lucky, flowers everywhere. It's more have some balance, have some diversity in your game. Because when I see a Dark Souls game, I cannot tell you're in level 1 or in level 8 or whatever. Even Elden Ring, when I'm seeing that, I'm like, that's a cool open world. Everything looks the same though.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just would like to see some diversity. That's one thing. Another thing is, I like systems. I like and I'm sure they do. They do have systems. I'm not saying that they don't. I just would like to see a bar going from left to right in some sort of way. It doesn't have to be exactly that. And I'm sure there are. I've seen Sekiro, so there are some upgrades that I saw in there. But just make it more deliberate. But yeah, I think if they nail those two things down, I would be really interested in a From Software game. I agree with you, Ryan. They don't need to increase their difficulty, but at the same time, I don't want to feel like every time I die, I just go back to square one and I just haven't. Like, I understand I'm learning something, but it's a high learning curve for like a new player.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel inviting.
Or even if it's not even a new player, it's like even if you're an established player, if you don't have the time committed, it's like, well, I guess I'm never playing this game. Like it's that kind of situation too, which is a feel bad. Like it's definitely a feel bad when you have, that taste in your mouth. Well, next up, we got a question that again, we're gonna acknowledge this question came in, but I don't think either of us are gonna answer this one. From Joran7x at Joran7x on Twitter, and they ask, "What is your favorite boss from each Souls game?" Garrett, I don't have any answers for this one.
I don't either, but let me tell you, Jerome, I really enjoy the boss designs of the Dark Souls game and the Bloodborne. They're really cool. I think the Sekiro one was pretty. What's your favorite boss in Sekiro? Because I know there's some pretty good ones.
Believe it or not,
there.
Because this question came in so late, I didn't go back and look at any of the bosses I fought because I forgot all of them.
So I remember one battle I saw a lot, and that was the drunk monkey or kind of the.
I remember that. Boss.
Yeah, and it looked so irregular, like you're trying to go after it and try to like beat it or get into contact with it. It's so hard because you don't know when it's gonna strike. It was actually a pretty cool boss to see. Yeah.
And to be honest, with bosses in that game in particular, I think the high point from me in that game wasn't even the bosses. It was the minute-to-minute gameplay more than anything, which is why all the boss designs just like flew out of my brain, essentially, where I don't honestly remember them because it's also been like 3 years since I played that game. So it's been a long time since I played it, and I don't remember any of the bosses. But I will say one of the most memorable gameplay moments from a boss fight in that game is actually the very first boss fight where you're supposed to technically lose, but you can actually win that boss fight against the dude on the horse who's got the spear. But I just love the motif of the environment you're fighting in, where you're fighting in this field and the moon's out. And I love the way that scene just looks. So that scene is burned into my brain more than even, any of the mechanics with that boss or anything like that. So yeah. And I think it just comes with, I just haven't played that game in a while, so I just can't remember. But last question this week has nothing to do with FromSoftware, Garrett, because West3DP at West3DP on Twitter wanted to bail us out and give us a off-topic topic. So,
of course,
West3DP wants to know, off-topic, what are your thoughts on Live Alive or Live Alive or however you say it? Have you played it? Will you pick it up? So, Garrett, the Nintendo Direct was yesterday from the time we're recording this. I mean, obviously, this is a week and a half old at this point. But what do you think about Live Alive or Live Alive?
I was very pleasantly surprised by seeing this game. It seemed like an Octopath Traveler game, like it very much so. And now we can see kind of the influence from it. So Live Alive It was originally a Japanese exclusive title, and it was out in the Super Famicom, right?
Yep.
And so now it's getting remastered or remake, really, in HD 2D version, just like the Dragon Quest 3 that's going to come out later. It looks really cool. I'm very excited to see more of it. I want to see more gameplay. I heard it's something like a spiritual predecessor to Chrono Trigger. And like there's some very famous people that worked on this game. So yeah, I'm very excited to see it come alive again, coming on the Switch. Maybe other titles later. I'm not too sure.
They haven't really announced it. I think it's just Switch only according to the website, but I'm actually also stoked for this one. It's a game that I've never played. It's always been one of those games on the list of like 5 or 6 Super Famicom games that should have come that would have done gangbusters here in North America, but just never came out here. and for a long time, Trials of Mana was on that list until it eventually got its remake a few years ago. So I'm actually stoked to play this. And actually the difference between this and something like Octopath Traveler is you have kind of the 6 different characters with the 6 paths, but they actually, unlike Octopath Traveler, they actually come together at the end and kind of like have like a combined story, where the Octopath Traveler is like, you've got 7 different endings for 7 different characters and they don't tie together at all. So I love the idea of it kind of coming together like that. So I'm glad I held off playing it, because I know there's a fan translation out there that I could have played by now. But I've just never really gotten around to it. Even though I've, finished, Trials of Mana like 4 or 5 times before the actual translation came out for that one, because I played the fan translation a lot for that game. But I am excited to see this. Also, fun fact, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the Discord, Garrett, but we actually got requests in the Discord for us to do an HD2D episode. And we're starting to get enough HD2D games, Garrett, where it might actually justify doing an HD2D episode of just the
maybe
games.
Later this year after Live Alive.
I kind of want to wait. Yeah, I kind of want to wait until like that and like Dragon Quest throughout.
Dragon Quest 3.
So we talk about some of those games. I also think
Triangle Strategy. Yeah.
I also think we're going to start seeing this a lot too. Like I think like if Square wants to remake any more Super Famicom games, they're going to do them all this way at this point. Or Super Nintendo games.
Exactly.
So, which is perfect, because I think this is a great way to do that. Or if they ever want to remake the original Final Fantasy in something else that's not Stranger in Paradise, I would love to see them do it this way. That'd be pretty cool. But anyways, we got to go, Garrett. Before we go, Garrett plugs go.
Yes. You can follow me on Twitter at Bland Explosion. You can also see me and the Nintendo Shack, where I'm a co-host there, part of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network, where we are live at twitch.tv/PSVG every Thursday nights. And that is it.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Capriz, on YouTube at youtube.com/Yumi Capri, and on podcast services around the globe. And before we go, I just want to say huge, congratulations to everyone for Elden Ring this week. I hope everyone enjoys the game.
Yes.
I hope everyone who's excited about it gets, the awesome game that they're hoping for. And happy Elden Ring week, everybody. Well, for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been episode 35 of the RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye-bye.
The RPG Cave's mana is powered by patrons over at patreon.com/Yumi Capri. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you to our over 70 patrons, starting with our Capremium producers, Dallas Ford, Jonathan Brown, the man behind the music on the Xbox Drive and the Nintendo Drive. You can check out his new album, In My Element, over on Apple Music, as well as his website, and Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team. Our platinum producers are Robbie Bobby Miller and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Brandon Myers, Dallas Robbins, Dano, Emily O'Kelly, Foolish Fuji, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Marcus O'Neill, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, RJ Kern, Skinny Matt, Tony Baker, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support, and if you're interested in joining the Patreon, head over to patreon.com/Yumi Capri and pick the tier that's right for you.